I want to move for a bit to Russia.
Sure.
Kellogg is out, apparently. He is he got his walking papers, and apparently in January, General Kellogg is going to say adieu or good day. What do you make of that? I mean, because several things are happening at once. Ukraine is getting crushed on the battlefield. I mean, it's obvious at this point. I don't even know how anybody can spin this anymore, that this is a quote unquote stalemate. They are getting crushed. Aside from the rout, they're in financial dire straits. So 50 billion in the hole at the end of the year. Euroclear is not given permission to take the money, or let's say Belgium is not given permission to take 140, $200 billion in Russian money. And Euroclear has gone so far as to say they would take them to the court if they indeed tried to do so. So you have a budget shortfall. You have Europe who can afford the budget shortfall. You have a collapse on the battlefield in regards to manpower, capability, desertions, etc. And you have a corruption scandal that is rocking Kiev. I mean, like, it's an utter implosion in regards to the corruption scandal. And I just read on the thing where they're talking about Zelensky's name is in those files. I would say, obviously. Many of the people have abandoned Ukraine at this point. You have Yermak, who rumors saying he's going to be on his way out. Again, I want to stress rumor. Chief of Staff Umarov, I'm sorry, Yermak is Chief of Staff. Energy Minister apparently has fled Ukraine. Umarov has apparently left Ukraine and said he's not coming back. Again, those are rumors in regards to Umarov and Yermak. But obviously, there's a lot of Ukraine is being rocked right now from multiple sides at once. And then Kellogg is on his way out. Okay, that's interesting.
I will make a prediction
of this.
I will make a prediction. You remember when Biden pulled out of Afghanistan? It was intended to be a smooth handoff. There had been negotiations for years going on in Dubai, and it was like, on this day, the USA will hand Afghanistan over to the Taliban, and it was supposed to be smooth, and it was anything but that. And it was utter chaos, and the airport blew up, and the military equipment was left behind. And you remember that? That's what's going to happen in Ukraine. They're trying their hardest to have a smooth handoff, but there's a section of the NATO intelligence, there's a section of the American deep state, there's huge disagreements about it. And what happened in Afghanistan, it was very clear that, that there had been negotiated. It had started quite a bit under the Trump administration and continued under the Biden administration. On this day, we're going to hand Afghanistan back to the Taliban. We're just pulling out. And there were forces that didn't like the Biden administration. There were forces that didn't want the handoff to happen, and they sabotaged it internally for political reasons. And it was an absolute disaster for the United States. It was just an absolute disaster. That's what's going to happen with Ukraine, right? And Trump is trying his hardest. He wants to make the handoff, make the Ukraine war end in a way that makes him look good, in a way that doesn't look bad. And I'm predicting that, just like the Afghanistan pullout was done in a way that it was sabotaged internally, I think Trump, as much as he's trying, the Ukraine handoff is going to happen. It's going to be a similar thing where they just say, all right, the war is over, and it's going to blow up in Trump's face. And Trump knows this, and he's trying to minimize it. He's trying to negotiate that the handoff, the ending of the war, happens in a way that doesn't become a huge PR stain on his face. But there's almost no way to avoid that, because it's not just the United States forces that are there. I mean, there's the intelligence services of all the NATO countries. The British in particular are really mad. They want to keep this going. They don't like Trump. And that when the war ends, it's going to end in a way that Trump looks very bad. And Trump knows this, right? And he's tried everything possible, Tulsi Gabbard releasing the Russiagate file and all of this, but they're going to end the war. And when the war ends, the British, the NATO intelligence agencies, they're going to end it in a way that Trump looks really bad. And the consensus in Western media is, oh, look at you, Trump. You just gave Ukraine to Putin. Oh, man, look how incompetent you are. Look how awful it is. And that's how it's going to end. And there's really nothing Trump can do about that, right? And Trump is trying to avoid this at all costs. And he's I want to end this gracefully. I want to end this in a way that looks good for me. That's just not going to happen. The NATO forces are just not going to let that happen. It's going to end. It's going to end. Like, it's just going to end. Okay. We know that this war ends when the United States says it's over. That's what we're just waiting for. We're waiting for the United States to sign a piece of paper and just say, all right, we're done. And when that happens, NATO and the British and the Atlanticists and sections of the American deep state that are working against Trump, they are going to make it as big of a mess as possible. And I have no idea what they're planning, but there's going to be something. There's going to be some image. There'll be like some, I don't know. There'll be like some beautiful site in Ukraine with Russian tanks drive over it. Oh, look what they did. There's going to be some big image on CNN of what an awful thing Trump did. And there's going to be, I don't know, there's going to be, kind of like the helicopters in Vietnam or there's going to be there's going to be a bunch of stupid media theater about how dare Trump abandon the Ukrainians. He left them behind. Oh, it's going to be horrible. And that's, that's just how it's going to be. And it's shitty. And that Trump would like to end this war in a way that makes him look good, but he can't. And they're not going to let him. And that's my prediction. So what do you think of that?
He should have just walked. Like when Trump, I keep saying this, man, like on day one, when Trump first got in office, if Trump would have said, this is not my war. This is Joe Biden's war. I'm out. I'm calling it a day. I'm walking.
Yeah.
He would have been far better off, because the problem is exactly the way you put it, right? Like for all intents and purposes, what they're going to say is this is Trump's war. We're nearly a year in with Donald Trump effectively keeping this war going. And it's Trump that lost the war is what they're going to say.
Yep.
And my thing is, either you're going to get blamed in the beginning, where you could have worked out a relatively deal. Yes, it's going to be Russian terms, but you could have worked out a deal. As opposed to now, where it's clear as day, when you have the New York Times writing articles saying, yeah, they don't have food, they don't have water. Pokrovsk is surrounded. Seversk is, they're fighting in Seversk. Kupiansk is surrounded. Leningrad is effectively surrounded with Ukrainians surrendering en masse. Okay, that looks bad. That looks horrible, right? And you are the president who is presiding over that, as opposed to when you could have went with the lie of this is a stalemate, and I'm calling this a day under the terms of it being a stalemate. Those are radically different positions. One, you can't hide. The other one, you might be able to hide from and just say this is Joe Biden's war, this is his failings, etc. Now, I agree with you. I don't know how you get out of this looking, smelling like a rose.
Yeah. And I you're right. If he had done this early on, it would have just happened and then it would have been over with. And then they could have just moved on. But now it's going to be much more on Trump. He's going to be tainted by how badly it goes. And it's unfortunate, but I just wish they could just do it. And there's just no way around it. They're not going to be able to end this war in a way that makes Trump look like a big hero who stuck it to Putin, because that's just not the reality on the ground. And everybody knows that. And they're trying to think of a way they can spin this as, America got him and Trump, but it's just not going to happen that way. Russia won the war. They've won the war. They've already won the war. And so how long are we going to keep throwing bodies at this until we just acknowledge that Russia won the war? And it's really a disaster. And it's really, it's an episode of mismanagement. As much as I think the Trump administration was more independent and all of that, they don't really have their own agenda. They don't really know what they want. They are good at pounding the podium, like you saw with the reporter. They're good at this. Oh, we hate you, mainstream media, but they don't really know what they believe in. What do they believe in? They don't know. They believe America first, or Israel first, or they don't even really know what they believe. They're kind of hijacking anti-establishment sentiments that are widespread in America right now. They're hijacking the fact that people are angry about, how the living standard is going down, and they're trying to, and I will say a lot of the Trump administration, this is, the Steve Bannon strategy. It's, I don't want to be ageist here, but it's pandering to elderly folks, right? It's older folks vote, and especially in red states, older folks live in red states and they vote. And it's like pandering to the resentment and the bitterness of elderly folks. Well, that might get you votes and that might win elections, but it's not real policy, right? And that's a lot of what the Trump administration does is just, you got, older folks throughout the Midwest and the heartland and the South who are mad about the way the country has deteriorated and feel betrayed. Give voice to their sentiments by putting another old guy, quite old man like them on television to, act and talk the way they talk. And, I've been hearing this for years, part of the America First rhetoric, right? Is this idea that the U.S. regime change wars are somehow like we're doing a favor for all these countries. I would hear that, like during the time of the Iraq War, most of the people in the area I grew up in just supported the Iraq War. But occasionally it would slip through of, why are we helping these Iraqis? Why are we helping them? Why don't we help people over here? We're not helping the Iraqis by blowing their country to shreds and violently overthrowing their government. But if you watch CNN, I guess that's how it's portrayed. And so it's this kind of like, well, we should help people here instead of helping people over there. We're not helping people over there. We're killing them and destroying them, and this idea that U.S. military operations and U.S. invasions are welfare or something. It's like, it's like we're doing these countries a favor or something. It's kind of accepting that neocon narrative, but just being bitter about it and wanting them to help us out over here instead of helping all those people over there. It's this very weird thing. Or, this notion that the USA is going around the world, giving stuff to people, right? They look at foreign aid and they say, oh, we just give all this money to foreign countries. Well, that foreign aid is to manipulate their politics. It is to destabilize countries. But again, a lot of conservatives, they accept the premise, the CNN mainstream media premise, that this is all just charity out of the goodness of our heart. But they're like, oh, we're being a sucker, I remember years ago, I was at an anti-war protest in Times Square, and there was a young man from Pennsylvania who had just enlisted in the Army. This was like late Obama years. And he came and he was arguing with us. And he was saying, well, the USA isn't imperialist, but it should be, right? It should be. I wish America was imperialist because I'm from this town and we're poor and all of that. And if the USA would just go around the world and steal stuff and make America wealthier, then that would be better. Well, yeah. And that's kind of, there's an element of that in Trumpism of like, this element of like, rather than the liberal pretenses of humanitarian intervention, let's actually be ruthless, right? You know what I'm saying? And that's, with the whole, Crown Prince thing, right? That was what Trump said, is that, instead of doing what the Obama administration did and pretending that Saudi Arabia wasn't so bad and all of that, Trump just said, yeah, they killed him, but we make money off of their weapons. We can sell them weapons, or Russia can. So I guess we just make money and who cares, right? And there's an element of that. And it's almost like, in a way, is it better or worse, right? Getting people to just be okay with brutal policies, right? That and then kind of playing into the idea that somehow that benefits us. I don't think American weapons manufacturers selling a huge amount of weapons to Saudi Arabia benefits you and me. I don't think that helps you and me, right? But the idea that it's okay to just be acting purely out of economic interest. It's kind of changing the script from the Cold War, right? During the Cold War, the narrative was America is the land of freedom, fighting the commies and all of that. And then the left, we would always point out, well, the USA is backing dictators. The USA is hypocritical. And there's kind of with Trump, there's an element of like, well, actually, yes, the USA is backing dictators. Yes, the USA is, acting selfishly, and that's fine because everyone else is selfish, and we just need to accept that. That's the way the world is. That's an element of Trumpism that is not so good, I don't think, right? And it equates the interests of the American people with the interests of American imperialism, right? And it's kind of like we want the USA to just be ruthless around the world because that's us, right? We're on that team too, and we benefit from it. And why don't we just lose all the liberal pretenses of humanitarian intervention and fighting for freedom and all that, and just have a ruthless government that just goes around the world plundering and all that, because we get some of the stuff for ourselves, and that's how it is, right? And that's part of the Reagan nostalgia, right? Is that you have this like, Reagan was not like Carter, right? Carter was very much, all about liberal human rights rhetoric and all of that. And Ronald Reagan was seen as this militarist, go get them. And that, that's the anti-communism, that you see in the Trump camp of, everyone's a communist. Mamdani's a communist. Bernie's a communist. That's part of that. It's kind of like under Reagan, we felt proud of America again, right? Under Jimmy Carter, he was going around apologizing. He was kind of doing this truth and reconciliation for the 1960s. Right. But Reagan was like feeling proud to be American again. It was kind of a repudiation of the previous decade of confusion that came out of the 60s political upsurge. So I don't know, a lot of this. And then the other thing is that these folks are not going to be around forever. The Trump voter, the elderly Trump voter is going to die. And there's a lot of younger people in the Trump movement, but they have a different perspective. And like the Nick Fuentes stuff.
Did you see his clip, that latest clip that he put out, effectively saying, look, man, MAGA is dead. We need to move to a new political coalition, a left-right coalition. The left needs to give up, I think what he said, the left needs to give up immigration, the right needs to give up capitalism. It was something to that effect. And it's like, whoa. he was like that political coalition gets 90% of the vote tally. If Rokana and Thomas Massey coming out on behalf of releasing the Epstein files, that has 90% of the vote tally. And then he pointed out this other thing of like anti-Israel that gets 90% of the vote tally. And he was like, there needs to be a new political populist coalition between the left and the right. And I'm like, whoa. Shocked the hell out of me.
I mean, I am for that in principle, but I don't trust Nick Fuentes, and that there is some weird 3D chess that is going on right now, where Marjorie Taylor Greene is against Trump over the Epstein files, which is weird because it's like now Trump wants the Epstein files released also. I mean, we're not going to get they're scrubbing it. All right. Pam Bondi is going through there, and there are some prominent people whose reputations will be destroyed, but there'll be some sacrificial lambs. That's my prediction. We're not going to get the whole thing. We're not going to get the real thing. Right. My prediction is it'll be the Clintons, because they're not in office anymore, right? The Clintons, I mean, Bill Clinton is, former president. He can't run again. He doesn't have a plan to. We all know he's got issues with women. Let me put it that way. Like, that's no secret. And Hillary Clinton is, so embarrassed. And what came out in the Russia files about she's a drug addict, basically. She's got a painkiller addiction. She's psychotic. She, and all that. So she's done. So if they
wait, you lost me on that one. That came out in the Russia.
Yeah, that was part of the Russia release that Tulsi Gabbard did, was that if Russia had really wanted to help Trump win the election, they could have, because they knew that she's addicted to painkillers, right? And that she had this painkiller addiction, and they had emails and all of that. Russia had intelligence that Hillary Clinton's addicted to painkillers. And they also had intelligence that Hillary Clinton was having meltdowns behind the scene and throwing things at people. And,
that part I knew.
Yeah. And so, that like they could have, if they really wanted to help Trump win, they would have released that, but they didn't, right? They chose not to. And that was a big part of the thing. So it's like Hillary Clinton's done. She's got no political future whatsoever at this point. I mean, now that that's in official government documents and all of that, that basically the whole world knew she was crazy and was like, all the intelligence, not just Russia, but the whole world was kind of doing intelligence research about our next president, and saw that our next president was nuts, a drug addicted, mentally ill, psychotic woman, it was just, she's done. So I expect they will release a lot on the Epstein, connection with the Clintons, because there's no danger in that. They're out, they're finished. The Clintons are done, right? They're finished, right? And there may be a couple other people that will fall from the Epstein thing, but Pam Bondi's going through there. She's able to delete things based on national security interests. And so we're not going to get the whole Epstein files. But the fact that Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene had that falling out, and now he's calling her Marjorie Traitor Greene, right? And like the Fuentes universe, there's some 3D chess going on, where it's like the Democratic Party apparatus and the mainstream media, they're trying to dismantle MAGA. So they've found like the more sincere elements in MAGA, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff, and they're kind of boosting them as a way to like kind of dismantle the MAGA coalition. And we're noticing that. And I will say something very, very, very unnatural is happening with Nick Fuentes. I've never seen anything like this, right?
What do you mean? Explain.
Well, I mean, Nick Fuentes.
And by the way, I'm not a Nick Fuentes fan, just to be very
I am not either. Nick Fuentes, there's mainstream media, like, I mean, Bill Maher had a whole like sketch on his show recently just about Nick Fuentes, and like,
really?
And it's like they are boosting this guy who is an internet racist and an internet extremist. They are boosting him and making him, they want him everywhere. And it's not people who agree with him. It's like they've chosen him to be the face of a certain form of dissident politics. And that makes me wonder. And I ask questions because, we've seen some weird things happen. Like, for example, the Charlottesville events, right? In the lead up to Charlottesville, right? White nationalists protesting to save a Confederate monument, the leftists protesting against the white nationalists. That's like the oldest that has happened. But in the lead up to it, it blew up like you wouldn't believe. It was everywhere. All of a sudden, go to Charlottesville, and every Trumper in the country was getting emails. Go to Charlottesville. It's the most important thing. And every leftist in the country was getting emails. It's going to be the biggest thing. You got to go there. And everyone went to Charlottesville. And instead of having an army of cops between the two sides were just kind of left right next to each other. And it's not like it was all a big conspiracy that people weren't told what to do. But if you put, if you blow something up so everyone from both sides convenes in an area, and then you don't put security, and what happened, right?
Right.
And January 6th was also a similar thing. Again, Trump said, I'll meet you at the Capitol. It was a huge thing. And then conveniently, the doors of the Capitol were left open, and there were FBI informants there, and look what happened. I mean, it looks to me, and then there's also weird things like, before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, right? You'll notice that there was a South Park episode about him right before he was assassinated. And all of a sudden, I mean, he's been part of the Trumposphere, Turning Points USA, but they started blowing him up, like giving him a huge amount of attention before then he got killed in Salt Lake City. And is that a coincidence? Maybe it's that people were more aware of him, so the killer was more aware and did it. I don't know. But I'm seeing what they're doing with Nick Fuentes right now, and I feel like it's unnatural. The people that would normally not give somebody like that the time of day or attention are blowing up Nick Fuentes. They want people to pay attention to Nick Fuentes and see him and all of that. And I almost feel like something's going to happen. Okay. Something's going to happen. Part of it is they're trying to dismantle MAGA, right? And that they see, that they have their Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nick Fuentes are both, more sincere in their MAGA sentiments than Trump is. And they're dismantling it. They're like an argument against MAGA. But part of me, I feel like something is planned. Like there's going to be some kind of, something that will fall out, and they want eyes on Nick Fuentes when it happens. They want everyone seeing him as the face of something. I will say the other thing part of the reason I hate Nick Fuentes in particular is that there's just that tone of voice that he uses. He's an asshole. He's a swarmy, sarcastic. He's not, there are people with that point of view. I don't agree with that point of view, who articulate it in a sincere way, who sound like, I believe this, whatever. He doesn't, right? I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene, for a long time, he called her Large Marge. That's what he called her. He called her fat. He dug into the fact, that she's divorced, and there was, they got into all these details about her private life, and she's divorced, and I don't care. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like for a while, it was like this whole thing. He was like going after her on like a personal level. It's insult comedy. It's personal attacks and the use of slurs, and kind of normalizing the use of slurs and all that. Yeah. He's not a political leader. He's like a shock jock, right? He's a shock jock and he trains a layer of young men that are opposed to the establishment to think that's the way one should talk about politics. And if you're not part of his little bubble, and to most people that are not part of his little internet bubble, if someone walks around and talks that way, has that sarcastic, rude attitude, insults people, you're an unpleasant person. No one wants to be around. But they get the young men kind of sucked into this internet bubble where they think that's a cool way to be, and that's just a way to be. And he just plays a very, very negative role, in my view. That he's not. He's just kind of cultivating people to be assholes. I just don't see him as. It's one thing to be wrong politically, but I think there are people that agree with him politically that don't cultivate their audience to be, rude, negative, and all of that. And then I'm seeing something very, very unnatural with the way all of a sudden they're blowing him up. And again, they are trying to dismantle MAGA, but I worry that they're setting us up for something else, right? They're planning something like they want Nick Fuentes to be the face of this type of politics when something happens, right? They wanted January 6th to be, that was the moment that we all learned to hate MAGA because they went into the Capitol, right? Charlottesville, it was like we were all psyched up that Trump is a dangerous president because there was this riot. Well, and I feel like they're planning something, and I don't quite know exactly what they're planning, but they suddenly, a lot of people who don't like Nick Fuentes are going out of their way to give him attention and put eyes onto him, which is a very odd thing because he's just this fringe internet racist who's been around for forever. I mean, he's just, he's this fringe internet racist who's been around from the beginning of time. But now I see they're really, really blowing him up. Why? And I urge people to ask why,
If I had to guess, everybody likes the guy who's in opposition to the person who you don't like, who's on their same side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has been getting a lot of press from, let's say, the left, or let's say from Democrats, because she's been going after Trump so hard on the Epstein thing. Trump is 39 points underwater on the Epstein issue. His polling has dropped from to 38% or some insane low number. So he's been taking a hit, right? And they're playing up this split in MAGA, this war in MAGA, as they call it. So you get the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Nick Fuentes of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, who are effectively like, hey, this doesn't look like MAGA to me. Like, this doesn't look like America First. This looks like something else. This looks like you're catering to Israel. This looks like you're catering to your oligarch friends. And, if you're a Democrat, whether you agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nick Fuentes, or Tucker Carlson or not, you look at that and say, hey, we like the fight that there's a fight taking place there. So let's boost this. Let's amplify the fact that there's a fight that's taking place in MAGA on this issue with these big names. Like, I can kind of see it. I mean, the way it's breaking down, you may not be wrong that something may take place and they want Nick Fuentes to be the face of it. I would warn them, though, be careful what you ask for. Now, the reason why I say that is if Fuentes takes this anti-imperialist or anti-capitalist tone, that is going to draw numbers. Meaning you are cutting into a Democratic base that you might not have otherwise been able to cut into if you had not amplified the person in that case, especially if he's consistent, right? If he's like, hey, man, we're not making it any better. Republicans seem to only care about the rich. Democrats only seem to care about immigrants. Okay, well, you may actually get a slice of people who may not pay attention to the racist, bigoted, asshole persona. They may just accept the things that you're saying. Think of the Bernie base. I'll give you a good example. Bernie Sanders. When it became clear that they cheated Sanders, and you got all of these people, I think it was like many of these people just stayed home. It's like, I'm not getting involved in this. You guys cheated my guy. I'm going to hate you forever for this. What if you have a voice like Fuentes at the exact same time that that's taking place? That's this kind of, I don't like these wars. We don't give in too much to the oligarchs, etc. Does he pull that base? Maybe. Like, meaning they better be careful what they ask for if that's the case. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I want to mention this. I mean, I'm just throwing this out there. When we think of like the left, like socialists and communists, and then we think of the right, of, the far right, racists, fascists, or whatever, there's a layer of people that are in this area, this space that is like somewhere in between. For example, like Julius Evola, right? Julius Evola is this Italian intellectual, was kind of made famous by the Mussolini government, was a critic of the Mussolini government because it wasn't conservative enough. And he was this Italian intellectual, and he wrote Revolt Against the Modern World, and he wrote Man Among the Ruins, and he was this Italian far-right intellectual. When he was quoted by Steve Bannon, right? Steve Bannon quoted him in a speech, and it became like a big thing in the New York Times. I went to go I figured I'm going to go read what Julius Evola had to say. So I went to go look, and who publishes Julius Evola's books in America? It's a company headquartered in Burlington, Vermont, that publishes yoga manuals. And I thought, this is odd, right? This is supposed to be this big fascist, but who publishes their stuff? It's a yoga company, a yoga book publishing company. But why is that? Well, Julius Evola was one of the leading experts on Eastern religion and Hinduism, and that, so Julius Evola, and if you read his writing, he has this whole like, he looks at the religions of the East. He looks at the caste system in India. He looks at Tibetan Buddhism and things like that. And he says, oh, this is more traditional. Everything's in balance. And and that there's, I remember during Occupy Wall Street, it was just like every one of these kind of like mystical new age communities kind of came out, right? And there's a bunch of them, right? Whether it's Hindu origin, the Krishna movement, or there's like yoga, and there's like Tibetan Buddhism, and there's different like breakaways from Buddhism and all of this. And that there's a lot of these kind of like new age, mystical, occult kind of politics where it looks like hippies, right? Which we associate with the left, but their beliefs tend to be quite, if you read what they really believe, their beliefs tend to be kind of far right, like theosophy. Have you ever heard of theosophy? Right? Yeah. Theosophy is a religious movement that, again, it's associated with hippies, like all the world's religions are one and all of this. But if you actually look at theosophy, communism is the main enemy, right? We have to mobilize to defeat communism, and communism is the main target. And we're trying to bring the world back in balance. We're trying to defend tradition. And there's a lot of this. There's a lot of this like kind of mystical stuff that is put in the left-wing category by, just by the hippie counterculture, by the 60s revolution. They're not Christian. They don't look like traditional conservatives. They glorify Eastern religion and things like that. But they also, the foundations of their beliefs are communism is the main enemy, and we want to restore the world to a kind of a traditional way, right? So there's a layer of that. And, when I think about Nick Fuentes and the way he's pushing things, like one of the leading Nazis after the Second World War in Europe was this woman named Savitri Devi. And she wrote a book called Lightning in the Sun. And she was a European woman who converted to Hinduism and was all about the Hindu faith and believed that Hitler was the incarnation of, I think, was it the god, one of the gods, Krishna or something like that. And that, there's a layer of like hippie kind of people that their beliefs have a lot in common with the far right. When it really gets down to it, right? And that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't fit what we understand about the political spectrum at all, right? But there are a layer of people that are new age in their orientation, that are mystical, that are quite critical of Western civilization, that are arguably anti-Christian. They view Christianity as like a religion of the weak or a scam or whatever, but also very, very anti-communist, very conservative, and often have oddly, when it comes to, they'll talk about the Israel lobby. They'll talk about, they kind of have a narrative where, Western civilization is being corrupted from within by Israel and Zionists, and it's, those folks are generally considered to be on the left because they're multicultural, right? They're not European, and they admire the East, but their beliefs are kind of, in line with, if you really sat them down, I don't think they would disagree with Nick Fuentes on that much, right? Even though, they wouldn't be white nationalists, I guess, because they're all about non-white people and non-white religions and all of that. But their beliefs about Western civilization being corrupted from within and communism being the greatest enemy, and, their beliefs kind of don't stray that much from what people on the far right believe, even though it expresses itself in this very liberal cultural way. And that's one thing that is kind of strange, and that was one aspect of the new left that people talked about. I mean, the Hare Krishna movement in India are considered the far right, because they are fanatically Hindu religious, right? And they're very anti-communist, and it's, and all that. But in America, Hare Krishna is considered to be a leftist movement because they're, they go to peace rallies and they dance around and they wear orange robes or whatever, and it's kind of weird how politics works. And that's what I noticed during Occupy Wall Street is upstate New York is full of these kind of esoteric religious communities that are left, but not left. I don't know. I mean, we call them left because culturally in America, left is a cultural phenomenon of like you're worldly and you question the West and, and you're open-minded or something, but their beliefs are not left in, they don't believe in dialectical and historical materialism. They're certainly not communists. And they, they're kind of, their religion almost tells them they must be at war with communism. So I don't know, we're in a weird place. And, there is, what does left mean? What does right mean? I mean, I think Nick Fuentes, I mean, he kind of just calls out the, what do they call it? The emperor has no clothes. I mean, Israel gets a free pass, right? I mean, they do. And so it's not hard to just get up there and show that Israel gets a free pass. And that's a taboo thing to say on the right, but it's true. And that people that are serious and actually engage with right-wing ideas can see that, oh, yeah, we give Israel a free pass on a lot of things. People can see that, and that, Israel first is not consistent with America first. And he's made his career pointing out what should be obvious, and what is obvious to a lot of people, but is just kind of forbidden in mainstream media. He's made his career doing that. And yeah, we're just going to see how this develops. I don't know what's going to happen. I will tell you, my organization, Center for Political Innovation, we're trying to navigate all of this. It's a very confusing political terrain that we're in. But we just have to stick with our principles, right? We're opposing the danger of a new world war. We're opposing the emerging low-wage police state. We want peace with Russia, China. We want a government of action that fights for working families, and you just stick to your principles. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, there's all this political confusion out there. You just got to stick to your principles.
Yeah, no, Caleb, that is a damn good point. Let me get one last question with Venezuela before I let you go.
Sure.
So some of the reporting has pointed out that Donald Trump is apparently, quote unquote, open to having additional dialogue with Maduro. This is a bit weird because the New York Times have reported that there was already dialogue with Maduro. Maduro offered apparently oil, resources, etc. The Trump administration turned them down. He offered to leave after a 2 to 3 year period. That's according to the New York Times. Who knows if that's true, right? For all intents and purposes, that could be stuff that's leaked into the media for political effect. But let's assume for the moment that it may be true. That was turned down. And so it's like, okay, so what else are you having a conversation with him about? He's given you pretty much everything, and you've already said no. Now, this is apparently being pushed by Marco Rubio, who effectively, Miami Cubans, has a hard on against Cuba, Venezuela, etc., who wants Trump to take military action to take territory effectively. Now, this seems like it's going to be chaos, but the U.S. has pulled Puerto Rico and has been reinvigorating the base in Puerto Rico. They've been having military exercises apparently in the jungles in some of these countries. And a report came out that 25% of all deployed U.S. warships are close to Venezuela at this point. This doesn't seem like just pressure. It seems like it's something else. But give me a take on this. I could be wrong.
I mean, I maintain that the Trump administration doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't know what they want to do and is probably internally divided about it. Yes. I feel like if they were going to demobilize, if they decided to do that, they'd be doing that already. But if they had decided fully they were going to strike, they would have struck already, or they would have attacked. And that the fact that the New York Times unleashed this week, I mean, they really want regime change in Venezuela, right? And the Machado Freedom Manifesto and that lunatic. It's like there's a faction, and it almost looks like desperation. They're afraid they won't get it, right? We're as close as we've ever been to a military confrontation with Venezuela, and it looks to me like there's a real fear that it just won't happen, and they're getting a little desperate, and they really want to make sure it happens. And I really hope it doesn't. And I mean, it would be an absolute disaster for the region. And Trump's approval ratings are really, really low. And if he starts a new war, he's going to be even less popular. That would be an absolute disaster. And I feel like the Trump White House, to some degree or other, they're smart enough to just realize we won't benefit from this politically. I don't think they care about the Venezuelan people or all that. I think it's just that there is a big section of the White House team that's just saying, if we do this, we lose politically, right? And they realize that, and they just don't want to, they just don't want to take the risk. And then there are some that just say, no, that's, it is an obsession. It is an important part of the far right. It is an important part of the Trump political movement, is the Miami Mafia, the Miami Cuban crowd, the anti-communist fanatical exile communities. We're going to do this, and they can't decide if they're going to do it or not. And they don't know. And I think a lot of it, the Epstein files may have something to do with it, and what comes out related to they're waiting for that, the fallout for that, and the negotiations with Russia and Venezuela are very close, right? And that if the USA attacks Venezuela, what can they do with Russia, and how's that going to affect them at the negotiating table? It's all tied into everything else. It's all a deal, I will say. It's not a matter of principle by any means. I think it's just there's a compromise, a negotiation taking place about what will ultimately happen, and we shall see. I mean, I think it would be an absolute disaster for the USA to attack Venezuela. I mean, the facts are not there. I mean, they're talking about drug gangs that don't even exist anymore. I mean, you look at the detail, the whole thing is just completely fake, and everyone can see that.
Yeah.
And so are they going to go actually strike to make Marco Rubio happy, or are they going to, just start to back away? They don't know.
How do you back away at this point? I mean, like, it looks absurd either way you look at it, right? Like, you've put all of this military hardware in the area. You've threatened, you've browbeat, you've done all of this stuff.
Yeah, well, you need the media conversation to change, to not be looking at you backing away, right? And again, that's kind of like Ukraine. Trump has to be able to back away in a way that doesn't look like he's retreating, that doesn't look weak. The fact that he said he's open to talking to Maduro, like they've already talked, right? And that's been revealed, but the fact that he said that, he's trying to give himself an out. That's what that looks like to me, right? He's trying to say, okay, well, I can end this by saying I got Maduro to make some huge concession. He's almost trying to give himself an out of like, oh, well, we're open to talking. Well, anyone who knows the details knows they've been talking this entire time. And, but that's, maybe that looks to me like Trump is trying to give himself an out. And we'll see. I mean, hands off Venezuela. I mean, this shouldn't be happening. And the other thing is that Venezuela is getting way more support than they would normally be getting because Trump is doing it, right? Colombia is ready to fight on the battlefield for them. Like all of Latin and South America is lining up. Europe is against the attack. And I mean, it's like Venezuela is actually, because Trump is so hated internationally, they're getting a lot of sympathy they would not normally be getting. So I mean, it's lined up that if Trump actually does attack, he's going to be widely castigated for it, and the result is going to be instability, and it'll be disastrous, and everyone will be able to see that. So we'll see.
Do you think Russia gets involved in this?
No, there's already Russian military contractors in Venezuela. They've already got a huge amount of Chinese military hardware. Colombia says they will fight. Colombia's military will fight the United States, and they'll get involved on Venezuela's side. So I mean, Russia, would Russia send its actual military into Venezuela? I don't think so, because a direct military exchange between U.S. troops and Russian troops, that's World War III then. But I think Russia's already involved, and that Russia would militarily support Venezuela. They already are. I mean, at this point, Russia's heavily involved in supporting Venezuela.
Caleb, awesome breakdown. I always appreciate these conversations. Your knowledge and your breadth of knowledge of this stuff is just always impressive to me.
Well, I always enjoy coming on. It's always fun. We have great conversations. We have a level of depth here that you don't find anywhere else. So we get the whole story and we dig deep into it. So good stuff.
Thank you for that. Caleb Maupin, he's speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Caleb is director for Center for Political Innovation. Check him out. Check out his organization. Check out his channel on YouTube. That's the other one. You're also on YouTube channel under the same name, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, man, thank you for this. You be safe, okay?
You too. Good luck.
Thank you. All right. Shout out to Caleb. We've had a good show today. We had a really good show.